Poker's legendary champions, next-generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. Today is a Wolf edition, as I promised. I don't even know when that first episode was released. It feels like a lifetime ago, but maybe it was like a month and a half ago, maybe?
Feels like so much has happened for both of us in the last 2 months just working on Wolf strats.
Yeah, it's... Like I said, it feels like it was an eternity ago, but it could not have been more than 6 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
And promise to follow up and, just episodes along the way to keep up with the journey of the Wolves, the journey of the program, lessons learned, pitfalls, all of the, ins and outs of starting a coaching for profit and rolling into a staking operation. And I've given you free reign to compile questions. I've asked the village to give, supply us with questions, what they want to know about the Wolf program. So, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can be Mr. Host of this episode. Take it away, John.
It sounded like the most popular question, or the thing that people wanted to kind of know the most about, was just kind of a brief description of who the Wolves are. Like, I guess we can just start with how many of them are there. Were they professional poker players before they joined Wolves? Just kind of the basics.
Yeah, so there are 5. That was the amount that I wanted to bring on straight from the jump, was 5 Wolves. So there are 5. 2 of them are professional poker players, and the other 3, they have careers, day jobs, even families that they can still make the Wolf program work in their lives, but they're all aspiring to, play poker professionally or generate a win rate that gives them options in life if they so choose. So, and one commonality is that 4 out of the 5 of them, I coached them a lot over the past year. I'm very familiar with 4 out of the 5, and then the fifth one that came into the program is someone that I just like. I just think they're a good human being, and I think they're trustworthy. I think they're hardworking, and I think they're very intelligent. So even though I hadn't worked as intimately with him, it still made sense for the program. Just have following my intuition, right? Following Patrick Leonard of you need to like the people that you bring into your coaching for profit or staking operation. So that's the 5 Wolves. I haven't properly introduced them or who they are. I don't know exactly whether or not they want their identities revealed in a public way. That's why I've instituted a somewhat questionable amongst the Wolves policy of, having code names to speak about the Wolves publicly, just because I think that when you publicize something, there's a lot of added pressure in what they're doing, right? And I don't know that necessarily added pressure is ultimately beneficial to the guys in the Wolf program at this juncture, just because they're under enough pressure learning the strategies, doing coaching, reviewing all their hands, kind of having every hand that they play at the end of the month publicly displayed in the group, going through leak finding, all that sort of thing. I just don't think added pressure is beneficial to really any of them at this time.
Yeah, and I'm sure that after they've all been turned into 10 BB per 100 winners, that it'll be way more exciting to talk about who you are and kind of add that pressure to yourself. They'll be ready for it then.
Yeah, right now it just doesn't bring very much to the table, but over time, we will, I'll talk to them. We'll have frank conversations about whether or not they want to be talked about, whether or not that's something that is meaningful to them. And if it is, then yeah, we'll move forward. But I do want to, I want to keep the identity of the Wolves like kind of close to the vest for now, just because, like I said, I just don't think there's much to gain.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of cap off this intro section of the episode, like, could you go a little bit into like what sort of poker players these guys were before Wolves? Like you said, some of them are professional, some of them have day jobs, but like what kind of stakes were they playing? Were these guys, winners, break-even players? Were they struggling to win at the stakes that they were playing? Or
so they were all playing 200 no limit, except one who's playing 100 no limit. Collectively, they were around break even, right? Like I think all 5 of them combined, although, some of them were winning. I think the biggest winner was winning at like 5 or 6 BBs per 100 at 100 no limit before they moved up to 200 no limit. Some guys are winning at 2 big blinds per 100. Some are like break even over, 100K sample. So it's kind of a mix, but for the most part, like collectively kind of breaking even, winning 1 or 2 BBs per 100.
Oh, I think they're being a mix and kind of just the Wolves sort of not being crushers like right from the get-go, like as soon as they applied. I think that's probably like, give some hope to like a lot of potential applicants and people who are watching this and maybe hoping to join the CFP in the future, that like, okay, like you don't have to be a, some crusher at the stake that you're playing. Like a lot of the guys who have joined, in this first iteration were, like you said, they were collectively break even. So,
yeah, I mean, I like problem solvers. I like people that can think through problems, solve them on the fly. I like people who are not risk averse, people who can put money in the pot. I think that's a big component of the Wolf program. We've talked about it many times before on Tactical Tuesday, that like having somebody that can, put money in the pot, it's a lot easier to kind of pull them back from the edge than to push somebody towards the edge that doesn't want to go there. When, collectively, you mentioned win rate, but I think like the way that the graph looked for each of the Wolves collectively, individually, is like their red line was going like straight up pretty much. They're like all red line warriors, and their showdown winnings were kind of going down, which is atypical, I think, in poker. A lot of times the red line goes down and the showdown winnings go up. So going back to what I said before, red line going up is like you're calling, you're probably calling too much. You might be bluffing too much. And those are issues that I think like, we can kind of rein in, and just easier to kind of coach and communicate versus, again, like somebody that's just playing like very tight and is afraid to kind of just be at risk.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And yeah, it's definitely something that we've probably touched on multiple times across Tactical Tuesday episodes. And I'm sure you've talked about it with other podcast guests as well.
For sure.
So I guess the question that everyone is probably dying to know is, how did the first month go? Just, I guess, statistically, like how much money was won or lost? The black and white numbers.
Yeah. So not good is the answer, right? Like that's the reality. I think they collectively lost 2 BBs per 100. They lost, it looks like about 10 buy-ins after the first 70,000 hands of them being in the Wolf program, which, was, I guess I have to phrase this correctly. Like, it was disappointing to me personally, not in the Wolves, but more in like, wow, like they weren't just crushers overnight. Like this is actually like quite a difficult problem to communicate and effectively have guys, integrate new strategies, new ways of thinking into, into their games. And like, that's just, it's a tough problem to crack. And so the results were not instantaneous. As a matter of fact, the first month, one of the major lessons that I learned was that, first of all, everybody was very excited about the program, right? So when I started talking to students, when I made the podcast, like when people started inquiring about joining and being a wolf, I asked them if they wanted to start in December or January, because, December's got a lot of holidays, and yeah, it just seemed like it would be easier to start in January. And everybody was pumped to start in December. And I think what I didn't realize was that when you're flooded with information and you're trying to learn a bunch of new things while also, watching all of the private coaching replays, while also, actively studying and learning different things that you haven't encountered before, or trying to override existing information about how specific spots should be played, and putting in like a lot of volume. I mean, it's kind of a recipe for like overwhelm. And yeah, I just think that like it was way too much, way too quickly. So that was why this month on the 5th, I just asked all the wolves, I guess a big part of it for me is like to be flexible and to kind of learn your lessons, right? Over time as you get more data, and then iterate the process. So for me, on the 5th, I just asked everybody, hey, do you want to take a month to just learn and train, and practice like execution and integrating, and then, add a month to the back end of your contract. You have no volume goals this month. It's just about studying, learning, and then firing back up in February. And 4 out of the 5 wolves took me up on it. And like I said, this should have been a part of the process from day one. I just didn't realize how important it would be.
Yeah, I definitely experienced some of those like early growing pains with the wolf strategy as well, and we'll probably get into that. Like, we'll definitely get into that towards the end of this episode. But yeah, I think that was like, even for me, was like the biggest lesson coming out of like the first month or so of trying to incorporate these strats, was that like there was a lot to learn and a lot to process. And I almost can't imagine having to like watch all the group coaching things and do all the other things that the wolves had to do on top of, playing 20,000 hands and learning these strats at the same time. So I'm definitely sympathetic towards the 4 wolves who needed a little bit of extra time to get these under their belt.
Yeah. I mean, again, everybody was excited to get going. So we just kind of got going, and then kind of realized like, I think we skipped a step here. Let's go back and kind of just recalibrate and start again.
Yeah. You want to talk at all about like the one wolf who declined the month of studying and maybe why?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know why he declined the month of studying. Other than like,
what? I do.
You do? Why then? Why
You're winning too much money to stop playing.
Well, yes. So he won in the first month, and things were going well, right? Like, so he did well in the first month. And incidentally, which is very interesting to me, this is one of the wolves that's not a professional poker player, that does have a family and a job too, and didn't take the month off to study. I mean, he was doing well. Over the first 11 days of January, I believe he's winning like 30 buy-ins at 200 no limit. Like he's just kind of like destroying worlds right now, like kind of just crushing everything, while all the other wolves are learning and integrating the strats. I think another part of it too is like, and this is an interesting puzzle to kind of solve, is this specific wolf has been getting private coaching from me for over a year. He's bought all of the courses that I've released and really trusted me throughout the whole process. And so like a lot of the way that he thinks about poker, the way that he thinks about spots is kind of built on the foundation of like coaching with me and the courses that I've created. And so like whenever was learning like the wolf strats, it wasn't like he was overriding existing things, just different ways of thinking about poker than he'd encountered before. It was just sort of like a continuation of the way that he studied, the way he's thought about poker. So it was like a much more natural transition for him, which may or may not have been beneficial. But I do think it's important to just say that, like, yeah, the Wolf program was a natural extension of everything that he was doing before. And so I think it does make a lot of sense that he was able to, like, just integrate and execute quite quickly.
Yeah. Also, I think it's important to note that, like, for at least in the one instance that we've seen of someone like becoming really comfortable with the strats and integrating them correctly, like it's absolutely crushing the 200 NL pool on Ignition. I mean, 30 buy-ins in the first 11 days or whatever you said for January. That's
It's a lot.
that's like obscene. That's not just a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah. I'm hesitant to, it's like 13K hands, right? 12 or 13,000 hands. It's 30 buy-ins. So like he's crushing, right? And I'm just like hesitant to celebrate, until we get like a larger data set and sample. But the outlook looks promising.
Yeah, he was doing really well last month as well. So I mean, it's not just these 13,000 hands.
It's true. Like, just I'm not an early celebrator.
Right.
I'm like, I want to see the data, and then I can kind of be like, okay, like I'm terrified of like ever resting, or feeling satisfied, I guess.
All right. Well, I'm gonna do some early celebrating right now on this episode. I guess first thing I'll check with you is like, was there anything else you want to talk about with the Wolves program before kind of?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of it, and I think that like the audience probably wants to know about your experience because, you're crushing the games that you play in. I believe your win rate's like 7 or 8 at 1K and L, or it was 7 or 8 over like a, I don't know, what is it, like 60, 80K hand sample, something like that. So like you're very successful in the games, and as one of my lieutenants, you're in the Wolves program, kind of helping build out strats and give feedback and help the other Wolves like answer questions and be a part of the group coaching and all of that. So I mean, for somebody that was already successful and then introduced to the Wolf strats, like, let's talk about, your journey over these last couple of months.
Sure. So my first kind of foray into like just playing these Wolf strats and really making an attempt to integrate them, I think I would say started at somewhere in the middle of November. Like Brad mentioned, I'm not actually one of the Wolves, but I've been helping with the strategy development and a little bit with like the coaching here and there. So I got a little bit of a head start on the strategies because I was helping create them. So I started in the middle of November and really, really, really struggled to sort of change my game to like match these strategies, or I just didn't have like a good feel for like really what I was doing holistically. And so I was just kind of taking a lot of like piecemeal stuff and like, okay, on the flop I do this, on the turn I do this, on the river I do this, without really thinking about like, how does my flop action affect things that I do on the river, things like that. And so I would say for a month and a half, so all of December and the second half of November, I struggled a lot. I think I lost like 17 buy-ins straight, which was like 17K for me. It's just like, it just hurt a ton, especially just like ending the year off like that felt so just like gross. Like I was like, oh my God, like I was killing it this year. And like, now I'm like adding these upgrades to my game and I've just totally, punted off like a month and a half of work or like win rate. So I took the first couple days of 2022 off and just sort of tried to regroup and set like a strategy or plan for myself to get better at doing these strats. I think starting sometime early in January, the first few days of January, I decided to drop down to 500 Zoom and just use that as like a training ground basically for learning these strats and getting practice for executing these strats. And I think that actually was a really, really good idea. And it ended up being something that I suggested to like the rest of the Wolves, that like maybe dropping down and playing like smaller stakes than you're used to, but getting like tons more hands per hour at the Zoom pool might be a good way to practice, recalling these strats and using them. And so since I believe January 3rd, I've been playing Zoom and some 500 reg tables. It worked, like the strats worked really well at Zoom. So I started integrating some reg speed 6 max tables at 500 and things went really well there. So now I'm slowly starting to get back into like the 1K streets, and I'm using these strats at 1K so far successfully, but it's over a tiny sample, like over the last few days, basically. And I don't know if you want to show my results over like the last
Sure.
2.5 weeks or so. Yeah, it's just been like an absolute dream. Like
For the podcast listener, we can just talk about it. Your red line's pretty flat, which isn't really a thing for you.
that's actually like, it's probably like one of the most unexciting things about this entire picture. Like, I think like people will probably have to see like the BBs per 100 or whatever and be like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. But like, honestly, the thing that I'm most excited about is the red line in this graph, which is like basically break even. It's just a straight line from left to right, which is a huge upgrade for me. Even like my winningest months, I had like negative sloping red line, have had like negative sloping red line for, my entire online career. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to see that like these strats have helped a lot with that.
Yeah. And I can't really see the combined BB per 100 here in this like 15K hand sample over the last couple of weeks.
17.6.
17.6. And that ringing endorsement of getting crushed for a month and a half in the beginning, right? Like following that, like what has changed over the last couple of weeks, do you think?
It's gonna sound very vague, but I'm just like have a better understanding of the strategies, just from like top to bottom, like holistically. Like I understand like the big picture plan now when I'm playing a hand, and it's not just like, oh, okay, I have this hand on this street, which means I should do this action, which is how I was playing like the first month and a half. Other than that, like it's without giving the strats away, it's a little bit tough to like talk about like what I'm doing differently. But I mean, I'm sure, as people can tell from the red line, like I'm calling more, I'm bluffing way more than I used to. Just kind of strategically, I would say those are the two biggest changes to my game that I've made. Like I'm calling rivers and bluffing rivers significantly more than I've ever done before.
Yeah. So basically, you just have like a better understanding. You're more comfortable in the execution side, right? Where as before, and we talked about this too. And I think it's like just breaking even at poker, right? It is kind of good, right? It's not a bad place to be, like as a poker player, because like when you're dealing with rake and the blinds and all of these things, like just being a break-even player is like not a bad place to be. And so like trying to upgrade, or in your case, go from like 8 BBs to like 12 BBs, right? Like any sort of increased in big blinds per 100 for you is like quite significant to your yearly results. Like just 2 big blind, I mean, that's 25% more income at the end of the year, like just going from like 8 to 10. But like, I know I think the danger is in just kind of like throwing out everything that you know about poker and like trying to like replace it with something else, when the reality is like if you're breaking even or you're slightly winning, like quite a bit about poker already. You've got a foundation, and we don't just have to like crack that foundation and throw it off a bridge. We're just going to take what you know and then give you upgrades that will help you go from a break-even player to, a 5 or 10 big blind per 100 winner. And I mean, ultimately that's my goal, right? Is for every single wolf to be a 10 big blind per 100 winner at whatever stake they play, which is quite an ambitious goal. But it is my goal. So yeah, I mean, and again, like I said, in that first month and a half, like we're in the learning phase, right? And this is something that, like, over time will change, and we can go back to even you were in the first class of pre-flop boot camp, right? The very first one, where it was $99. The day of the launch, I realized the software that I was going to use didn't do the thing that like I needed it to do, which threw a total wrench in how everybody was going to study, how people were going to learn, and how people were going to grow over the course of that I think the first iteration was like even 5 days. It wasn't 7 days. And so when my resources kind of were lacking, right, where it was like, oh, great, like, so now what do I do, right? It was kind of, okay, like, I have to take responsibility here for this program, and I'm going to will everybody to learning these strategies. And spent, something like, I mean, I don't even know how many hours I spent that week just quizzing people, asking questions, helping people learn and grow their preflop strats. It was a lot of time. I know that much. It was something that like is unsustainable for preflop bootcamp over the long run, but like it had to work. I had to make that program successful. It was just like, yeah, there was just no other alternative for me. And it's the same thing here with Wolves where, in the beginning, some things are going to happen that are unforeseen, right? The only way that you can kind of see these problems is by going through the process and finding them as they come up, which means that like over this past couple of months, the podcast listener probably recognizes there's been less CPG episodes every week, right? Like there's been less tweets if you follow me on Twitter. Like I haven't tweeted much. I haven't been releasing a ton of episodes because like this program has been all consuming to me. It is like I go to sleep at night, I wake up, I think about this program 24 hours a day. How do I help these guys? How do I will this program to be successful? And I think that like that's just what is going to happen for these first 5 Wolves over the first probably 3 to 4 months of the program. And then as resources get built out, as things become automated, as like I kind of understand the right buttons to press and the right sequence for future Wolves to take, then I'll be less involved, then I won't be investing as much energy in the program because it won't be necessary. Like, I still do the private coaching, I still do the group coaching. And then for the most part, a lot of things are just already in place for the new Wolves. So yeah, that's sort of how I think about this program right now is like, the guys who are in it are getting a lot of my energy. Most of my working energy are going into these guys, whether it's just messaging them and asking like, how are you doing? Like any questions, like anywhere you're struggling, and then hopping on like an impromptu call and meeting with them for an hour, right? Like that's just not going to happen 6 months from now, but it will today. So anyway, that's sort of how that's the experience of Wolves for me thus far and sort of how I anticipate things moving into the future.
I think that's a really good analogy comparing it to preflop bootcamp and like the struggles that you experienced in the first iteration with just setting up the program and having it run smoothly. So yeah, I think that's a really good perspective to have just going forward, so that, these are just the early growing pains of running something like this for the first time, and next time it'll be smoother and a lot less work on your end.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the nature of things, right? We don't, when I launched the program, I think I said in the first episode that like, there's going to be problems that I don't foresee. Yeah. And we just have to deal with those when they happen. And I think the trick is that like experiencing problems and resolving them as quickly as possible, and then iterating and doing better moving forward. And like over time, we kind of eliminate a lot of those problems just because we've experienced them before. But like systematically trying to resolve the same problem over and over again, I think that's not that's not a good system of operations, right? It's just like, and some problems are quite difficult. Like some problems take a lot of energy and a lot of effort, right? Like creating this poker factory where somebody comes in, goes through it, and comes out the other side is like a 10 big blind per 100 crusher is not a simple problem to solve. And it's not easy. But yeah, it's been a very fulfilling and rewarding challenge thus far. And, hopefully next month and the month after, when I have a larger data set for the Wolves to share, we'll have a sexy looking graph with, well over 100,000 hands, and things will be kind of operating seamlessly.
Yeah, I hope so. I think maybe a little bit biased by my own recent experience, but I really do think and hope that we're kind of turning the corner when it comes to like at least these first 5 Wolves kind of really getting the strats down and feeling good about using them every day.
Yeah, and I mean, like, to be fair, and I think that like a cynical person, right, could be like, oh, like, look at John's graph, that's like 15K hands. He's just on like a sick heater, right? Like he just is running super well right now, whereas like in November, December, he was just running bad or below average or whatever, right? So like really having the larger data set, and I think that people from the outside should be cynical, honestly, about a program like this. I think that you should be suspicious because it is quite a difficult challenge. And I think though now in the middle of January, as we're recording this episode, I'm pretty hopeful that the end result is going to be exactly what I envisioned. And yeah, over time, now it's just on me and on the Wolves to kind of prove that.
Yeah, hopefully next time we record one of these podcasts, we'll have some really good news to share.
Well, I can be damn sure that the one Wolf who's running right now is going to have a nice looking graph.
Yeah, we'll just show his and pretend that's the aggregate of all five. Whoa.
Yeah, like he's destroying it right now. So like I'm pretty confident that he's going to have a sexy graph. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to. I can't prove it, but like I do feel like over the past few weeks, there's been a bunch of different breakthroughs that will, be reflected in the Wolves' results over time, including like your own breakthrough, right? Like, and like I said, we don't have a massive data set, but like you can speak to the comfortability level of like November, December, and then how you felt the last couple of weeks in January.
Right. I'll just make a big data set and show everybody in a couple months. Just wait, guys.
There we go. Yeah, and John's gonna be putting in more volume than probably any of the other Wolves. So, yeah, we'll get the data set sooner rather than later.
Way easier to put in volume when you're winning, by the way. That's another thing. It's easier to get myself to play when things are going well.
Yeah. Anything else before we close down this episode of the Wolves?
No, that was it for me. I think.
All right.
We'll have, I don't know. You want to do this like every month or something?
I do. I think like it's just good to give a rundown of how the program's going. And for the record too, cpgwolves.com is where you submit your application. And until, it'll probably not be until March 1st that I start doing interviews with potential Wolves, and then like April before the Wolves, the new Wolves actually get in there and start going to work, because if I've learned one thing, that month of onboarding and learning is quite essential to the program. So that's all I got for now.
Well, see you next month.
See you next month.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.